The Galactic Conclave had debated this question for 300 standard cycles. Every spacefaring species had, at one point or another, been raided. The Keth had lost 17 colony worlds in the expansion wars. The Vrelian Hive had suffered 2 near-extinction events at the claws of the Devourer fleets. Even the ancient Sarati, who had held dominion over the Outer Rim for millennia, still bore the scars of the Silence campaign in their genetic memory. But the humans? The humans had never been attacked. Not once. Commander Zyrex Talon had devoted the last 11 years of his career to answering exactly that question. He was the finest intelligence officer the Conclave had ever produced, a being of cold calculation, 6 limbs, and a mind that processed tactical data the way other species breathed. His bioluminescent markings had gone pale in the artificial light of his war room aboard the analysis vessel Unblinking Eye, surrounded by holographic star maps and centuries of accumulated threat data. He had studied every predator species in the known galaxy. He had mapped their expansion patterns, their aggression thresholds, their preferred prey. He had cross-referenced every known conflict in recorded history. And every line on every chart, every data trail, every pattern of predation, it all curved around humanity like water parting around stone. There must be a reason, his aide, sub-analyst Preth, had said once. Perhaps humans simply got lucky. Zyrex had not replied. Because luck, over 300 years, wasn't luck. It was design. The answer came on a Tuesday. Humans, Zyrex had learned, were peculiarly fond of Tuesdays. He had arranged this meeting at a neutral station, Waypoint Thessera, a trading hub in the buffer zone between Conclave space and the human sovereignty. The docking arm was busy, loud, smelling of fuel and 40 different alien cuisines. Zyrex moved through the crowd with the careful stillness of a predator who has learned to disguise himself as prey. Admiral Darian Voss was waiting for him at a corner table in a place called the Drifter's Cup, nursing something dark and hot in a ceramic mug, looking for all the world like a man with nowhere important to be. Zyrex had studied the Admiral's file until he could recite it from memory. Darian Voss. 61 years old, though he looked 50. Commander of the 7th Human Fleet. Veteran of the Braxis Corridor standoff, the Siege of New Carthage, and 17 smaller engagements whose classified nature meant Zyrex's file simply read 17 times. He had never lost a fleet action. He had also, notably, avoided most fleet actions entirely. That was in the file too. Voss didn't fight if he didn't have to. The intelligence community had debated for years whether that made him cautious or calculating. Zyrex was beginning to suspect neither word was adequate. Commander Talon, Voss said, without looking up. You're 4 minutes early. I respect that. Admiral Voss. Zyrex folded himself into the chair across the table. Human furniture was always slightly wrong for his body. You agreed to this meeting. I appreciate your candor. I agreed because you've been following the same trail for 11 years and you're getting close. Voss finally looked up. His eyes were a quiet gray, unhurried. I figured it was better to have this conversation myself than let you stumble into the wrong conclusion. Zyrex set a data chip on the table. I have records of 47 separate first contact events between human explorers and species that have historically attacked, raided, or consumed other civilizations. In every case, the aggressor species chose not to engage. He paused. Why? Voss picked up the data chip, turned it over in his fingers once, and set it back down. You ever study wolves, Commander? I have studied your planet's predators extensively, yes. Not for tactics. For behavior. Voss leaned back. A wolf pack doesn't attack every animal it encounters. It attacks the ones it calculates it can win against, relative to cost. And there's one thing that will stop a wolf mid-charge, almost every time. He paused. If the prey turns around and looks at it. Zyrex was quiet for a moment. You're describing deterrence. I'm describing presence. Voss took a slow sip of his drink. Deterrence is a doctrine. A policy. Presence is something else. It's the thing that predators read before they consciously decide anything. It's the answer to, is this thing going to cost me more than I gain? And humanity's answer to that question has always been yes. Voss set down the mug. Look at your data again, Commander. Not what happened in those 47 encounters. Look at what almost happened. Look at the intercepts, the communications between aggressor species before they made contact with us. Look at what they saw. Zyrex had looked. He had looked many times. But he pulled up the files again in his memory now, this time through a different lens. The Keth Raider fleets, 300 years ago, plotting their expansion corridor, and then inexplicably rerouting 17 degrees away from human-colonized space. Their internal communications cited resource inefficiency. But in the raw sensor logs, their lead vessels had lingered at the edge of human territory for 6 hours before turning away. The Devourer fleet incursion of 2219. They had consumed 11 worlds in 8 months. Then they had reached the Auroran cluster, where human settlements and military installations were densely packed, and they had simply stopped. Changed direction. Chosen a different arm of the galaxy entirely. 47 encounters. 47 decisions by aggressive, expansionist, often mindlessly predatory species to quietly look elsewhere. They ran behavioral analyses, Zyrex said slowly. On humanity. Every one of them, Voss agreed. Different methods, different instruments. Same conclusion. Which was? Voss smiled, not warmly. It was the smile of a man who had held a very large, very quiet secret for a very long time. That we don't have an upper limit, he said. Every other species, when you push them hard enough, breaks. There's a point where the calculus flips, where survival instinct overrides fighting instinct and they run or surrender or assimilate. Predators learn to find that point. It's how they survive. He folded his hands on the table. They could never find ours. Zyrex felt something cold move through him. Because it doesn't exist. Because we're the only species in recorded history, Voss said quietly, that responds to existential pressure by escalating. Every time. Without exception. You back a human into a corner, Commander, not a person, a civilization, and we don't calculate odds. We don't run survival models. We get creative. He let the word sit in the air. And creative, in a species that's been at war with itself for 10,000 years and managed to survive anyway, is the scariest word in any language. The noise of the station continued around them, traders arguing, ships docking, 100 species going about their ordinary lives. Zyrex sat with the data chip in front of him and felt the entire shape of his 11-year investigation settle into focus. The wolf didn't attack because the prey had turned around. And what it had seen in humanity's eyes wasn't fear. It was patience. It was the absolute, bone-deep certainty of a species that had survived ice ages and pandemics and its own worst impulses and still clawed its way into the stars, a species that had looked at every catastrophe in its history and said not enough, and kept going. It was a species that didn't know how to stop. The Conclave will want to know this, Zyrex said at last. They already know the shape of it, Voss replied. They just didn't want to say it out loud. He stood, leaving a few human currency chips on the table with the ease of a man who had done it 1,000 times in 1,000 ports. We don't conquer. We don't expand by force. We trade, we explore, we build. But every species that ever looked at humanity through a weapons targeting scope and thought about pulling the trigger has felt the same thing. He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. That they were the ones who should be afraid. He nodded once at Zyrex, a respectful acknowledgement, nothing more, and walked out into the crowd of the station, unhurried, one unremarkable human among thousands of aliens, in a galaxy that had quietly decided, long ago, to leave humanity alone. Zyrex sat with the data chip for a long time. Then he closed his files. He didn't need them anymore. The Conclave's official record of the Waypoint Thessera inquiry, classified at the highest level, contained only a single line of summary. Humanity is not protected by weapons, treaties, or geography. Humanity is protected by what it is. The file was sealed the same day. No one requested it be reopened.